Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Daniel of Daniel Financial Group, and I have a wonderful presentation that I'd like to share with each and every one of you all. It's called, Oh My, Obama Got Reelected, Should I Stay in the Market? Now, before we get started, I wanted to point out, I'm going to try to be as, how should I put this, least political as possible during this presentation. But, folks, this is a legitimate question, regardless of whoever was in office. But as I sit in my Little Rock office day in and day out, I have this question asked to me over and over and over again. So I felt it would be a good idea to give you all some facts and figures on why I feel that it's always a good time to prudently invest your money. But how can we feel good about what our investment decisions and our investment portfolios when all we hear is bad news? I mean, what are we hearing in the news today? We hear problems overseas, higher taxes, higher government spending. Everything is relatively negative, and it makes most folks, the common investor I should say, very nervous about being in the market. So let's get started. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is that the markets today, they're forward-looking. So whatever you hear in the news or read or looking on the internet, it's already priced in today's market. So expectations about the future, they're already in today's price. They're already factored in. Now, I'm also going to show you all that market returns are not strongly related to macroeconomic variables like GDP. I'm going to prove that today. I'm also going to prove that markets can provide positive returns during recessions. Believe it or not, I'm going to show you all today it's possible. Then I'm also going to show you, as I always do, that timing the market is a dirty game, and I highly don't recommend it. So, to start it off, I wanted to give a very, very special thanks to Dr. Marina Lee at DFA Advisors in Austin, Texas. She helped me put this slide together, and I think it's a wonderful slide. Basically what we see here is real GDP growth from 1900 to 2010. And when I say real GDP growth, basically what that is that's simply GDP growth with inflation already taken out. So, as we look at the graph, all of the blue lines on the top going up, that's positive years. And all the little red ones, the small little red ones down here, that's when we were in recessions. So, as we look, looks like our first recession was in 1904, and we had a couple there, and then, whoa, we had a big doozy here in 1930. That was the Great Depression, of course. Then in 1945, wow. Now, as I look at this graph, something really grabs my attention, and I want to point it out. If you look at the graph, look at 2008 versus, let's say, like 1930. Now, it's kind of like going to the dentist, 2008 was really bad, but look at 1930. I mean, that would have been like you was going and having a root canal. I mean, but I want to ask you this question. What is the major difference between 1930 and, say, 2008, our last crash? Anyone? 24-hour news and internet. It blows things completely out of the water. And in fact, it's almost, when you're watching CNN and Fox News, it's almost like, pornography, if you will. I mean, it's a financial pornography. I mean, it makes people make bad decisions because of all the negativity that we hear. So, what I wanted to show you is what we have here on this graph are real equity returns during those recessions. So, and also, this is the entire equity market. So, small caps to large caps, everything in between, the whole market. So, as we look at the graph, 1904, I don't know if you can see it very clearly, so I'm going to read it. 1904, we had a negative GDP growth of negative 1.26, but real equity returns were 26.59. Wow, that's a heck of a return. Well, let's show some more. Okay, 1933, remember that was a really bad one. We had negative 2.1 GDP growth, and real equity returns was 56.29%. That's amazing. Well, if we added up all of the recessionary years, we would actually come up with real GDP growth of negative 4.37. Now, the real equity returns with inflation already taken out, of course, we have returns of 11.27%. Now, when I first got into the business, it was a pretty common thought. I always thought that, well, if the economy, or if we were in a recession, well, that would usually be a good indication of the market's not doing good. Well, this graph clearly shows that's not true. Now, past performance is not indicative of what's going to happen in the future, but let's look at adding in the good years as well. So, if we added the good years into the recessionary years, the real GDP growth would be a positive, of course, of 3.31%, but real equity returns was only 8.07%. Now, folks, I'm a really big believer in compliance, and I've had compliance check this presentation over and over and over again, because some of these numbers really stuck out like a sore thumb to me. So, as I look at this, you know, in the bad years, we returned about 25% better than we did when we added in the good years too. That was an eye-opener for me. So, now that's just at the United States level. So, I thought it would be a good idea to add another variable into it. So, let's look at it at a global standpoint, if you will, and let's take it another step. Let's say that we knew that the economy was going into recession beforehand, and we moved our money into the safe money, which is what I like to call it, which are T-bills. T-bills, they don't earn a big rate of return, but they're always positive. So this is a great slide, and let me set it up. First of all, we have our countries. The first column we have here is if we did 100% market time. And unfortunately, that, as we watch the news, that's what they're promoting. Promoting the getting in when the market's this and when the market's that. Well, let me show you something. You know, if we knew that the market, or I should say the economy was going into recession and we moved it into the safe money, that's what we would have in this column here, which is called timing. That means we timed the market 100% correct. Now that's generally never possible, folks. And we also have the next column here, which is just equities. So that means that we just held on to our equities regardless of what percentage we might have. Well, let's see if there would be a difference. Well, general thought would say that if we market timed, we would get a higher rate of return. Well, let's check it out. First country I'd like to look at would be Australia. If we knew the markets were going to be bad, I shouldn't say markets, the economy was going to be bad, we moved our money into the safe money, we would return 9.11%, which is really high. Now, if we just simply left our money in equities, it would be just a smidgen lower, and that would be 9.07%. So we would actually have a difference, a positive difference of 0.05% if we tried to time the market. Okay, so let's look at Belgium. Well, Belgium, if we timed the market 100% correct, mind you, we would return 3.59%, but if we just held on equities, we would have returned 5.15%. Wow. That's an eye-opener. Well, let's look at the United States. That's way down here on the bottom. Well, if we timed the market, we would have returned 6.31% versus just simply holding on to our equities, 8.07%, which is the exact number right here. So this is over all of those years, guys. So what would you think the average difference would be if we added up all the different countries? Well, a general rule of thought would think that this number would be high, since timing the market is what, you know, a lot of folks try to do. So this number I'm about to show you, it should be high. So let's take a look. Wow. Folks, we actually lost half a percentage point by 100% market timing. That was an eye-opener. So the next thing I wanted to point out was, first of all, I want to give a special thanks to the Heritage Foundation. They helped me put these next couple of slides together. And the Heritage Foundation, basically what they are, is it's an organization that gives freedom scores to countries. So And they actually have pillars of economic freedom that they base those scores on. Number one, which a very free country would have rule of law, property and freedom rights, of course. They would also have a limited government, which, folks, I don't know if U.S. will be the most free in the most free category, unfortunately. But a limited government will have physical freedom and hopefully somewhat of a low government spending, which that's in the news left and right today as we speak. Number three, a free country will have regulatory efficiency. And number four, it'll always have open markets. So let's take a look at freedom scores around the world. So here we go. Now, let me set this up. This is the whole world. And they're all based on freedom scores, showing how free a country is, if you will. So, in the green, those are the countries that the Heritage Foundation consider free countries. Okay? So, but we only have three, and the United States is unfortunately not one of those. We have Australia, we have New Zealand, and we have a really small one there, and it's Switzerland. Those are the only three countries that we have. The next level down is where the United States falls, and it's under what they call mostly free. Now I want to point something out which I was blown away by. Canada and the United States are all in the same area, and so is Europe. So we're in the same category as Europe when it comes to how free our country is. And it goes to the yellows and then all the way down to the reds, which the reds are supposedly the repressed countries that, would be like Libya, Ukraine, Iran, and that sort of thing. And folks, generally, I would think a general rule of thought would be that if a country was free, they would get higher rates of return. Well, that's what I would think the common investor would probably say. Well, let's take a look. Now, what I wanted to do is I wanted to map out freedom scores and see how well they did inside the equity markets. And I wanted to take it on two different levels. I wanted to look at it on a developed market standpoint and then also on an emerging market standpoint. And I wanted to graph them from most free, see how they did against what I would call least free countries. So in our developed markets, we've got Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, and Ireland. And we're going to map those, or I should say graph those, against least free in the developed markets, which is Norway, Portugal, France, Italy, and Greece, which was in the news quite a bit a few months ago. In the emerging markets, on the most free category, we're going to look at Chile, Taiwan, which that's where I was born. Thanks, Mom and Dad. They were stationed overseas in the Air Force. South Korea, Czech Republic, and Mexico. And we're going to graph those against the least free in those emerging markets, which would be Brazil, Indonesia, India, China, and Russia. So, I'm going to ask yourself at home, what do you think would return higher rates of return in the equity markets? Do you think it would be the most free countries? Or do you think it would be the least free countries in the various different markets? Let's take a look. Okay, so what we have here, folks, is the economic and equity markets. So this is the entire equity markets like we showed you beforehand. And it shows you what a dollar would have returned starting from 1995 to 2010. So if we look at the most free country, we have this red line, which looks like from $1 it jumps to $3. Okay? Well, on the other hand, the least free country did quite a bit better. $1 jumped to $5. Wonder why that is. Well, I like to seem to think that the countries that are less developed, they have more opportunity for growth. But now they're a little bit more risky, so you got to be careful with what you're doing. Well, let's look at it on an emerging market standpoint. And if I'm right, this should be really out of whack here. So, most free countries, $1. Now this is in 1998, okay, because that's when the emerging markets started up. 1998 to 2010, of course, $1 on the most free went from $1 to about 7. Now, that's pretty good, but folks, look what happened in the least free countries. $1 grew to, good night, 13. It doubled returns. Wow, that's pretty, well, almost double. But that was an eye-opener, I would imagine, for quite a few sitting at home. Now, in conclusion, GDP growth, it's linked to a lot of things. It's linked to higher incomes, higher longevity, better education, well, overall increased life satisfaction. Also higher longevity, lower infant mortality, but it is not, and I repeat, it is not related to the stock markets or how well the equity markets return. So, folks, this is where I'd like for you to buckle up your seatbelts, because this is quite honestly why I tried to send this presentation out to those that could not make my coaching sessions 3 or 4 weeks ago. So let's take a look at presidential returns with the Democrats and the Republicans since we started keeping track of records in the markets, of course. So let me set the slide up. This is a great slide, and I'm quite honestly very proud of putting together. So let's see here. The red line that we see, that is the S&P 500, which is a very broad index of United States large stocks, and relatively quite a bit of people are invested in this S&P 500, and I also wanted to point that out. The green line, well, that would be simply our small stocks. The little blue line here is the U.S. Large Value Index. Now, what that is in English is basically a large company in the United States that is sold at a value or a discount, if you will. So, in my eyes, they have a good opportunity for growth. Unfortunately, a lot of people they're not invested in this category, but they do quite well. The same thing goes with these microcaps, which is the purple line, and most unfortunately, most folks are not invested in the U.S. small value research. Now that, in my opinion, is one of my favorite asset classes that most investors don't know anything about. And it's a small stock that is sold at a discount or a value and has a lot of opportunity for growth. So let's get started and see how well the president's returned. I shouldn't say the president's returned. Let's say how well the equity markets did while certain presidents were in office. So the first president we have is a Republican, and it's Calvin Coolidge. He did quite well in the equity markets. The S&P 500, if you had a dollar that started off, it would have grown to $2.09. The highest return, which was the Fondement French Small Value, which was $1 to $1.98. That was the second highest, I should say. Now, whoa, what happened here? Oh, that's right, a little funny thing they called the Great Depression. Now, folks, if you thought 2008 was bad, look what the markets did back with Herbert Hoover while he was in office. If you had a dollar in the S&P 500, that dollar would have dropped to 28 cents. Could you imagine what the news, if we had 24-hour news, how the television would be covering that? Wow, it would have been a bloodbath, probably. Well, if you had them in the microcaps, you had some investments in the microcap stocks, say a dollar invested, it would have went from $1 to 13 cents. 13 cents. Whew. Now, before we go to the next president, I want to point something out. The markets, for some reason or another, they always seem to make themselves back if you just hold on to things, if you will. So, look what happens with the next president, and that brings us to our first Democrat president in our presentation today, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, if you look at him just right off the bat, he's got quite a few more years than the other presidents. Well, this is before that two-term limit was enacted. So, but let's see how he did in the markets. He was in office from March of 1933 to March of 1945. 12 years. Wow. Well, if you had your money in the S&P 500, that $1 would have grown to $4.61. Wow, that's incredible. Now, I want to point out, now, you remember those microcap stocks that tanked? Well, look what they did. They went from $1 to $28.36. That's a heck of a return. Now, unfortunately, your common investor, they never see these returns because, well, your common investor, they sit there and they get in when the market's at an all-time high, like right now, and as soon as the market dies, they get out, they sell. Well, unfortunately, that's a terrible behavior, and it's truly fueled by television and the financial pornography, if you will, on the television. So that's unfortunate. But look at these returns, guys. The micros went from $1 to 28 bucks. The small value, which is an index that I'm pretty fond of, went from $1 to $17. That's pretty amazing. Harry Truman, positive equity returns. In the S&P, $1 went to $3.10. The highest asset class was Fama & French large value, which again was those large stocks sold at a discount, or a value if you will. And they went from $1 to $3.68. All right. Next we have a Republican president, Dwight D. Eisenhower. Well, positive equity returns. He received the highest rates of return in the Fama & French Small Value Index, which went from $1 to $3.22. Strong returns. The next president is one of my favorites, which unfortunately his presidency was cut way too short by a ruthless assassination, but while he was in office, the equity markets returned quite well. And actually the highest asset class was this large value index, went from $1 to $1.61. Lyndon B. Johnson, positive equity returns. He had the highest rates of return, was in the micro caps. The lowest returns was in the S&P, but hey, they were still positive too. $1 went to $1.66. Richard Nixon, I like to call him tricky. Mr. Nixon here, unfortunately, had negative equity returns in all asset categories except for a couple. He lost money in the S&P 500, which went from $1 to 91 cents. But he did squeak out positive returns, actually in one class, which was the Fama & French Large Value, which went from $1 to $1.05. Which, wow. Well, the worst he did was in the micro caps, which $1 went to 37 cents. All right, then that brings us to Gerald Ford, Republican, from August 1974 to December of 1976. The S&P, positive equity returns, $1 to $1.50. He did the best in the Fama & French. He didn't do the best, I should say the markets did the best. In the Fama & French Small Value, which went from $1 to $2.06. Now, if you're sitting at home and you're thinking, wow, there's not been any negative years during the Democratic presidents. I know, folks, and that's why I had compliance check this 10 times. So, Jimmy Carter, that's right, even Jimmy Carter received positive equity returns. Ronald Reagan, the Gipper, he did quite well in the equity markets. The top returns were in the Fama & French, those small value stocks, which went from $1 to $5.79. George H.W. Bush, the good Bush, had all of positive returns in the equity markets. Bill Clinton, well, now folks, I'm from Arkansas, but I have to say, Mr. Clinton, I thought did quite well while he was in office. The markets did wonderfully well while he was in office. So let's take a look and see how President Clinton did. Small values, which is a pretty common thing, really going up high, went from $1 to $3.81. S&P went from $1 to $3.56. George W. Bush, which some people like to call the bad Bush. Well, I should watch what I say, but George W. Bush, you know, the S&P 500 received negative equity returns, which that's where a lot of investors put their money. It went from $1 to 79 cents, but folks, look at this. This is kind of eye-opening. Every other class had positive equity returns. And it was led by Fama & French Small Value, went from $1 to $1.83. Now, keep in mind, this is pretty much in the decade what they called as that no one was returning money in the equity markets. Well, you weren't getting any returns if you had where most people had their money, which is in the S&P. might want to think about adding the diversification to your portfolio, and well, you could get returns during those lost decades, if you will. So that brings us to our current president, which is Barack Obama, the chosen one. Also, this is only showing from January 2009 through December of 2011. So if we added today's numbers in, which I could not do due to compliance issues, his numbers would be even higher, believe it or not. So Barack, what he did in the equity market, strong equity returns. His highest returns were in the microcap stocks. So, you know, let's take a look and see what those various asset classes did starting from 1926 clear up into 2011. So if we put $1 into that market, and let's say we put it all into the S&P 500, which is that common index again, that $1 would have grown to $2,727, which sounds like a lot, but relatively it's not really that substantial. Take a look at the other classes. The CRSP decile 6 through 10, which again in English, not investment talk, that simply means the small stocks. $1 grew to $10,183, and the Froment French large value, which were those large companies that were sold at the value, it grew to 10,000 as well. The next one up would be the microcaps, which really got a good little return. $1 grew to $17,830. That's on $1. Now, folks, if you had your dollar in the U.S. small value, which again are those small stocks that are sold at a discount, that dollar would have grown to $114,502. So, but one thing unfortunate, most folks don't have that into their portfolio. Now, I'm not saying go out and get all of that in your portfolio, but I might recommend maybe a small portion based on your risk and your needs. So let's take it another step further. But that is all the presidents and those equity returns in those markets during those presidencies. Now I wanted to take it another step further because, well, I know this is the information you want to see. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to basically look at how the Republicans did versus how well the Republicans did. Or, excuse me, how the Republicans did versus the Democrats. Sorry, I'm a little biased maybe. Well, let's look at the Republicans first. Calvin Coolidge, he had total equity returns of 112%. The dollar went to $2.12. Hoover, which, now keep in mind this was during the Great Depression, so his returns were negative, which is a negative 74. The dollar dropped to 26 cents. Dwight D. Eisenhower, positive returns of 224%. The dollar did well. Nixon didn't do so well, and the dollar dropped. Ford, about 50% total return, and the dollar grew. Reagan did very well in the equity markets, or I should say the equity markets did well while he was president, and we returned 204%. Now this is the whole equity market, folks. From the earlier slides, this is all of those classes together. Bush 1 did well, Bush 2 did not fare so well. So if we added all of the numbers up, we would have returned a total of 753%, which sounds like a lot, but if you break that down annually, that's only 5.09%. That caught me off guard, I'll be honest with you. Be the first to tell you that. Now let's take a look at the Democrats. Might want to buckle up the seatbelts. This is where it gets bumpy. Now, before we show the Democrats, I wanted to point out, we're comparing apples to apples here. So we have 43 years on the Republican side, and we have 43 years on the Democratic side. So let's take a look. Now those returns from 26 to 2011, or 1926 to 2011, Delano Roosevelt returned almost 400%. Now keep in mind that was right after the Depression, and the markets always jump after, you know, a bad negative downturn generally. So he returned almost 400%. The dollar went to $4.92. Truman, positive equity returns, 181%. The dollar did well. Kennedy, positive returns. LBJ, positive returns. Carter, positive return. Getting a little redundant here, but it is what it is. Clinton, wow, he did really good, 242%. The dollar grew to $3.43. And that brings us to Barack Obama. Now, the total returns, now keep in mind, this is only to 2011, so if we added the rest of his years that he's been in office, they would blow these numbers out of the water. So the total return while Barack has been in office is 66.01%. The dollar grew to $1.66. But folks, this is where I wanted to get your attention. If you annualized all presidential returns, all of them, all the Democrats, all the Republicans, who do you think would be the highest? This is what blew me away. Well, annualized return, FDR 14, Truman 14, Kennedy 8, LBJ 12, Carter 13.66, Clinton 16, and Barack Obama has the highest returns out of all presidents. All presidents. And the sad part about it is most of our common investors are sitting on the sidelines. They're scared. How can, I mean, look, with the news and the radio and all that, I get your point, and I can understand what you're saying, but sometimes it's always better just to be invested prudently and forget about all that negativity. You know, that's a good rule that I like to live by. But look at Barack Obama, 19.56%. Folks, that blows everybody completely out of the water. That's why I had to share this presentation with you all today, and I'm not done yet. And that's only 3 of his years. You know, the markets are up like gangbusters this year. And sad thing is, lots of folks are sitting on the sidelines waiting for it to get better. Well, the markets are at an all-time high now, folks. But how can you with all that news? And I don't blame you. You know, in November of 2008, Time Magazine, the New Deal. 2009, all we heard about was that negative health care. Or I should say negative health care. I was trying not to be political. It will slip out from time to time. But, you know, paging Dr. Obama, this is going to hurt. It's scary. Very scary. Out of work in America, that's what Time says. It's kind of cute. Remember Jaws? America's vulnerable economy is what the economy says back in November of 2009. But, you know, guys, that's all we see in the news. 1.5 trillion new in taxes. Doesn't that make you just want to jump out and say, let's go invest all our money? I don't think so. February, Newsweek says we're all socialists now. Well, I'd like to say not everybody. You know, Time Magazine, what we spend. But, like, food stamps, take that for an example. Since Barack Obama's been in office, from January 29 to December of 2011, food stamps have gone through the roof. 32 million to 46.5 and growing. Welfare, 31 million to 39 million and growing. National debt spiraling completely out of control. And I understand it's very difficult and it's very scary to invest in today's markets with all of this news. I can understand your frustration. And unemployment. Now, this is real touchy for me because when they show those numbers on the television about 7.8 to 8.5, well, guys, that's not even including those people that just quit looking for jobs. That's just the people that are continually to look for jobs. So if they added in the people that just quit, I bet this number would be 13%. But now, folks, I'm not trying to be political. What I'm worried about today is market returns. How good's the market doing today? How good is it doing? So let's take a look at while Barack has been in office. What's been happening in those asset classes? So let's take a look. If you had $1 starting in January of 2009 and it ended in, say, December of 2011, that dollar, if you had it in that large value index, would have grown to $1.26. That's a great return. If you had it in the S&P, which is that common index, $1 would have went to almost $1.50, $1.49. Those small value stocks, $1 would have went to $1.60. The small cap stocks $1 would have went to $1.81. Now I'm going to break this last number down to people so they can really get an idea of what's going on today. If you had a buck, or no, if you had $100,000 and you invested your money in those micro-cap stocks, $100,000 would have went to $187,000. Who would have known today that you could have almost doubled your money in 2 years? Now, I'm not saying go out and put 100% of your money in these different stocks, or categories, I should say. What I'm trying to say is that maybe using a little bit of the different categories might help with your portfolio. And if you spread that risk around, you're really not worried and concerned, if you're invested globally, I should say, about what's happening in the crazy news. So, that brings me to the last portion of my presentation. And other than putting together those fancy numbers for you, this is where I am the most proud of. What I'm about to show you is the Gibbs audited portfolio performance of our funds dating back since 1992. Okay? Now, for those that don't have an investment license and all that good stuff, let me kind of set this up. A Gibbs audited report is simply a report of how well your portfolio is done with all fees taken out. All fees. Now I'm talking the investment advisor or coach in my with what I do, that's taken out. The portfolio manager's fee, that's taken out, as well as any transaction costs. Now, I'd like to ask those that aren't clients of mine, go to your broker at Smith Barney or wherever it may be, Edward Jones, wherever, and tell them, hey, Mr. Advisor, I'd like to see how my investments have done, and I want you to take out all fees. Well, good luck on that. And quite honestly, I'm all for transparency and being able to see everything and understanding, knowing what everything I'm doing and how fees are involved and everything. You know, when I got into the business several years ago, I wanted to do a few things. Number one, I wanted to have a fiduciary responsibility. I wanted to always have to do what's in the best interest of all of my clients. You know, some people have a suitability that they have to abide by. Well, I wanted to make sure that everything I did had to be what was in the best interest of anyone that worked for me. And I also wanted to set things up to where the Bernie Madoff situation and all of the craziness, it could never happen to anybody that worked with me. So what we do is we set everything up through a custodian. So you'll get two statements, so we can't cook the books like old Bernie did. So let's take a look. Now, the first portfolio I would like to present, and guys, I like to call these our mountain charts because I'm quite proud of them, actually. We've done quite well, so I'm very proud. So this would be a wonderful portfolio for someone that would be, let's say someone that would want very low risk, but wanted a return that would outpace inflation and the CPI index. This is someone that would have 75% fixed income, which I like to call the safe money, and 25% in global equities. Now, folks, with our portfolios, we're invested in 49 countries, not just the United States. And in fact, in the last, 10 years, you know the highest the United States rated out of all the 47 countries that we worked with, or that we are invested in? 7th place. So if you have all your money in the U.S., you're probably not getting the returns that you could. And we have another thing that we do about our portfolios that I feel that is one of the keys that sets us apart, is that not only are we globally invested in, for instance, this portfolio here has, I believe, a little over 12,000 holdings. And what we do is we will rebalance. So let me give you an example. We take advantage of whatever way the market goes. So the market goes up, we're going to help you. The market goes down, we're going to help you too. So let me give you an example. Let's use 2008 as an example. Well, in 2008, the equity markets crashed, right? I know you remember that. It wasn't just the other day, but it feels like it. Well, when the markets crash, that means that your equities have gone down on your portfolio. So what we will do on the fund level, we will rebalance you every day. So we'll make sure those numbers are staying the same. So we want to keep you at 75% equity or fixed income and 25% equities. Now, for instance, in the crash, okay, on that quarterly basis, we will actually rebalance your funds on the client level. And this is where I think the magic happens. So in 2008, when the markets crashed, your equities had probably plummeted. So you're sitting at you probably had 25% equities and might have went down to say 20. So what we would do is we're doing what everybody is the opposite of everyone else. Is we're actually going to be buying the equities when the market is falling. People think, that sounds crazy, Kevin. Well, folks, that's actually the best thing to do, because you always, when I was taught, you always want to buy low and sell high. So what will happen is when the market rebounds, which it always does, you know, we're going to get a much better jump, if you will. And just the opposite is if say the equities were doing good, like today. Okay, today, my gosh, the equities are going through the roof. So what we're going to do is we're going to lock in your winnings, as I like to say, is we're going to actually, well, when the markets are going up, equities I should say, you might have maybe 30% in equities at that time. So what we will do is we will move some of your equity money into the fixed income, and we're going to lock in some of your winnings. Wow. It's totally different from a lot of other folks and what they do. Well, that's what sets us apart. So let's take a look. If we had $1 million in our conservative portfolio, now, folks, I look at portfolios kind of like a roller coaster. This is our conservative portfolio, so it's going to be like the kiddie roller coaster. The Judge Roy Stream over in Dallas. I don't know if they still have it, but I remember going. Well, you're not going to get a lot of movement in your portfolio. Hopefully, it's going to go up, and, well, it'll have one downturn, of course, but look what happened the very next year. But, okay, $1 million. Now, this is from January of 93 to June of 20 and 12. And the CPI, which is, you know, that's where you have to be in front of the CPI index to really be earning money, you know, because that's how much the prices are going up, inflation, or if you will. But our conservative portfolio started with $1 million in 1992, and in June of 20 and 12 grew to $2.12 million. That's pretty impressive if you consider. A lot of this takes into consideration that lost decade, if you will. So let's take it another step forward. This is what we call our growth portfolio. Now this is a 50% stock and 50% fixed income. A good rule of thumb is that, this is not for everyone, because folks, I would like to point out every investor is different. Not everybody has the same needs. Not everybody can assume the same amount of risk. An older person probably couldn't take as much risk as me. Well, I know the markets, and I've got quite a time horizon to get to my retirement, so I realize the market's going to go, you know, fluctuate, if you will. But a good rule of thumb is having the amount of bonds as you are old. So if you're a 50-year-old person, this would be maybe a good possibility of a portfolio for you. So that CPI index went from 1 million to 1.668, but the balanced portfolio went from 1 million to 2.842. Wow. Now keep in mind, we're rebalancing when the markets are changing, and we're globally invested, guys. You know, when I was showing you the earlier slides with those various indexes in the United States, well, we take out the very top portions of those funds, and we use structured funds through DFA advisors. Most common investors, they can't have those types of funds, because working with DFA, you have to have at least a $20 million portfolio to work with them. So we use fancy funds, if you will. and we will rebalance them. And then we also will be globally diversified within 49 countries. And that's how we're getting these returns. So let's look at the long-term growth portfolio. This is a portfolio that is 75% equities and 25% fixed income. See what we did. 1 million, the CPI grew to 1.628, and this is from October 92 to June of 12. And then look what happened to the long-term growth. It went to 3.337 million. That is, I'd say, impressive. That's why I like to call these the mountain sharks. So now, but if you look, guys, look at the different swings in the numbers. See how this was real easy? Well, it's getting quite a bit more jumpy, if you will. But you know, that's why I like to describe your portfolio as a roller coaster. You know, not everybody can go to the Beast over there in Ohio. Has anybody been to the where is that? The Beast is over there on Queens Island, I believe, and it is the most crazy roller coaster I'd ever been on. It's kind of like our aggressive portfolio. This is a 95% equities and 5% fixed income. Now, Daniel Financial Group, what we do is we feel that fixed income is basically simply used for stability inside your portfolio. You know, you can get income off of fixed income, but primarily it's used to simply stabilize your equities, because your equities, that's where you're getting your returns from. It's not the fixed income. Fixed income simply to stabilize you, especially in today's market. One thing I wanted to point out about the fixed income, within our portfolios, we're actually using the fixed incomes of all those 49 different countries, and we will actually change your allotment. As, for instance, now, bonds are a scary thing in the United States because the interest rates are starting to change. And that bond market is not so favorable. Well, back a few years ago, the bond market was booming. And that's where most folks, not most, that's where I say a lot of folks had their money. And it was safe, and well, they were getting income, and it was a great, great deal. But as those interest rates change, well, we'll actually start looking for better returns on the bonds in those world markets. We will change the allocation. We use special yield curves. The research that we use, that I get access through at Madsen Money, is one of the key aspects of what we do here at Daniel Financial Group. That research is second to none, and well, that's why we're getting these returns, quite honestly. So, on that aggressive portfolio, wow, look at it. It jumped clear to, well, almost $3.7 million. Folks, that is an eye-opener because, number one, this is through a time that most folks weren't doing so well. That's why I wanted to point out my returns after all fees. You know, and that's why I'm very, very proud of this. And in conclusion today, what I'd like for you guys to leave with is simply a few key points. Number one, don't let the news and the media and the 24-hour internet and all that, don't let it get in the way of making good financial decisions. You know, you can get positive returns at any time. You just have to be invested prudently. So if anyone has any questions or would like to sit down and have a comparison of what they've done versus what we've done, I'd love to show you a portfolio MRI and show you how well our funds stack up against yours. But also, it's not just the funds, folks, it's the coaching. You know, the coaching is in my eyes, probably just as important as what you invest in, because that coach, which is myself, well, he'll keep you prudent. He won't let you do crazy things. Well, he's not going to let you get in when the market, or get out, unless you're asking, of course, or when the market's taken. He's going to highly recommend you stay put, because as we're rebalancing, we're going to get you those returns, and it's going to jump even higher because of because of the rebalancing. You know, a coach is also going to show you how to invest your money in worldwide in a prudent and an efficient way. I like to kind of look at our portfolios kind of like a piston in the car, if you will. You know, a lot of folks are just invested in the United States, which hey, that's great. But, you know, the U.S. isn't always doing so great. And, you know, it'd be nice to kind of spread that risk around. Well, with our portfolios, you've got 49 different countries. And with our various portfolios, you got anywhere from 12,000 different holdings to up to 14,000 different holdings. So you can be prudently invested, and you can always feel good about your investments. So I want to thank everyone for watching today. I hope you gained some information that maybe caught your eye, or maybe spurred you, maybe want to think to give me a call, because I'd love to help you. And folks, you know, just because you sit down with me doesn't mean that you got to do something with me. I just like to teach folks and like to let you understand on good investment principles. So thanks again. My name is Kevin Daniel, Daniel Financial Group. Those that would like to get in touch with me can reach me at 501-588-3564. We've got a wonderful office here at Shackelford and Chenal Parkway. We would love to have you at any time. God bless you, everyone. Thanks again.